1:35 a.m., under the dim glow of streetlights in Wynwood, Miami, a woman's voice rings out like a plea. "I'll kill you with one hit." Seconds later, chaos erupts. The manager, a man she once trusted, advances. He and another man throw her to the ground. She's beaten, pinned, vulnerable. Then comes the gunshots. Not one, but several. She fires. He collapses on the asphalt. A white Lexus peels away, tires spinning, leaving her injured and shocked. Blood seeps into the pavement. This is not the way she imagined her ambition would end, yet this moment, her last-second action, is what everyone saw. What everyone will judge. Was it murder or a desperate act of survival? To understand how everything spiraled into that brutal moment, we have to go back. Kevhani Camilla Hicks, known on stage as Kevhani, was 27, ambitious, driven. She wasn't just a rapper chasing fame. She was the CEO of her own imprint, Pretty Thug Music. She believed her talent, her hustle, and her business mind could break through the cutthroat grime of Miami's music scene. She self-produced tracks, booked shows, handled social media, all of it. Every day was a late night. Every connection hard-won. On the night of the 9th of October 2023, in Wynwood, Kevhani got into a white Lexus with two men. Her manager was one of them. It was late, just after 1 in the morning. The streets were mostly empty. Wynwood walls, shadows long, quiet except for distant sirens and the hum of traffic on nearby arteries. What brought them together then, in that car, is still unclear. Was it a dispute over money? Over trust? Promises broken? We know only that things were already tense. They pull up near Northwest 2nd Avenue. The driver and manager exit the car. Words are exchanged. Something dismissive. Something aggressive. The driver allegedly shoves Vani, throwing her to the ground. The manager joins in, hitting her. Witnesses and surveillance video later confirm she is physically assaulted by two men. She is down on her back, beaten, terrified. From her statement to police, she said that during the assault, she heard the manager yell, "I'll kill you with one hit." That threat, she says, changed everything. It anchored fear in her bones. Around her, the attack escalates. One man climbs on top of her. She is pinned. The other looms. Escape feels impossible. Then, in what she later described as pure adrenaline or pure terror, she reaches for the gun she carried. Whether it was in her hand already or in her bag, she pulls it out and fires multiple rounds in rapid succession. Her manager, who had stepped away, who some witnesses say was retreating, now runs. He falls. Gunshot wounds. As he lies dying, the driver of the white Lexus flees. The same Lexus that had brought them here, that was part of the violence from the start, now becomes an instrument of further harm. It hits her as he escapes. She sustains blunt force injuries. He leaves the scene. The streets stay dark, echoing with gunshots and sirens. Police arrive via ShotSpotter alerts. They find Vani wounded, breathing heavily. They find the manager, multiple gunshot wounds, unconscious. At the hospital, he dies. Vani is arrested, charged second-degree murder with a weapon. Not premeditated, prosecutors say, but deadly force used. Key details. She says she feared for her life. Witnesses and video confirm the assault. The verbal threat. "I'll kill you with one hit." The question that split public opinion. When she fired, Was the threat over? Was it still imminent? Was he backing off? Was retreat underway? Prosecutors argue the manager was trying to get away when she shot. Her defense claims he was still a threat, still capable of striking. After initial hearings, bond was denied, then later set at $50,000 with house arrest conditions. She pleads not guilty. Her legal team frames it as self-defense, but the courts maintain probable cause for second-degree murder. Media coverage erupts. Supporters rally. Critics condemn. But then, as time passes, updates grow sparse. No trial date, no final verdict. The case, full of explosive video, raw emotion, and deadly force, sits in limbo. There's so much more to this story that will leave you speechless. If you find it worth listening to, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next part. By the time Kivani fired those shots, it wasn't just one moment, it was the crescendo of fear, betrayal, and power gone wrong. She lost everything in one split second. Her manager, the security of her own business relationships, her own sense of safety, but justice, legal clarity, the truth? That's still out there, hiding in details. What was said just before she pulled the trigger? What exactly the surveillance shows in those final frames? And most importantly, when the moment of retreat arrived, had the danger truly passed? Long before the shots rang out in Wynwood, Kivani was chasing a dream that didn't leave room for weakness. She wasn't born into money or privilege. Her grind was survival. Miami's music scene can look glamorous from the outside: bright lights, glossy music videos, the promise of sudden fame, but inside, it's brutal. For every artist who breaks through, there are hundreds drowning under debt, rejection, and predators who see them as easy prey. By 27, Kivani had already proven she was no ordinary dreamer. She launched her own label, Pretty Thug Music, not just as a vanity project, but as a shield. Owning her work meant control. It meant no one could steal her voice. No one could bury her songs on a shelf. But independence comes with its own price. Every decision, every dollar, every connection flowed through her. There was no safety net. And that's where her manager came in. He was supposed to be her partner, her advocate. In the music world, a manager isn't just the person who books gigs. They become the gatekeeper. They can open doors or slam them shut. They handle contracts, negotiate rates, shake hands with people who decide whether you're on a stage or stuck in obscurity. To trust a manager is to hand them the keys to your future. And Kivani, who prided herself on control, still needed that kind of ally. But alliances can sour. Managers sometimes take bigger cuts than promised. Sometimes they make deals without consulting their artists, claiming it's in the best interest of the brand. Artists often find themselves wondering if their managers are helping them or exploiting them. And when you're young, female, and ambitious in a male-dominated business, that power imbalance becomes more dangerous. Friends can become rivals. Protectors can turn into threats. In the months leading up to the 9th of October, the relationship between Vani and her manager seemed strained. Details are murky. Court documents don't spell out every argument, but the urgency of that late-night meeting suggests something was boiling over. Why else would an artist agree to meet with two men after 1 a.m. in a car parked in the shadows of Wynwood's walls? Was it about money? Betrayal? A deal gone wrong? The streets of Wynwood that night tell their own story. Surveillance cameras are everywhere in that district, capturing both art and crime. Neon lights splash across murals. Tourists wander during the day, But by night, those streets belong to a different Miami, the kind that lives in shadows, the kind where arguments don't always end in words. According to investigators, the Lexus carried 3 people: the driver, still unidentified, the manager, and Vani. What was said inside that car is still unknown, but something snapped. When the doors opened, anger spilled into the street. The driver lashed out first, shoving Vani violently to the ground. Then the manager joined in. Their combined weight and strength turned the confrontation into a 2-on-1 ambush. Imagine the fear. 2 men towering above you, blows raining down, voices screaming. Then, that chilling phrase, "I'll kill you with one hit." Not whispered, not implied, spoken out loud, captured in her statement to police. Words that cut like knives. For anyone, let alone a woman outweighed and outnumbered, those words could feel like a death sentence. And yet, in those chaotic minutes, surveillance shows something strange. After the beating, there's a pause. The men step back. For a moment, it looks as if the danger is over. But trauma doesn't vanish just because fists stop flying. Fear doesn't dissolve when your attacker takes a single step back. For Vani, adrenaline was flooding her system, her mind replaying those words, "I'll kill you." Was she supposed to believe the threat had expired? She made her decision. She drew her weapon. The bullets tore through the night. Her manager tried to run, but collapsed. The driver fled, hitting her with the Lexus as he sped off. When police arrived minutes later, they were greeted by 2 realities: a woman claiming self-defense and a man bleeding out from multiple gunshot wounds. Which version would they believe? The surveillance provided images, not sound. The jury of public opinion began to split immediately. Some saw her as a survivor, a woman who fought back when no one else was there to help. Others saw vengeance, not fear and execution in the street. The prosecutor's argument would hinge on one point. When she pulled the trigger, was she still in danger? If the assault had ended, if the men were backing away, but if the threat was real, if "I'll kill you with one hit" still echoed in the night, then maybe she was right to believe her life was on the line. The tragedy of that night is not only in the loss of a life, but in the questions it left behind. Did ambition and betrayal push their relationship into violence? Was this preventable, if trust hadn't curdled into suspicion? Or was the outcome inevitable, the moment fear replaced faith? The music industry thrives on stories of survival. But what happens when survival turns deadly? And as we look at the missing driver, the man who fled, struck her with his car, and has never been held accountable, another unsettling question rises. If justice is incomplete, can it ever really be justice at all? The streets of Wynwood don't forget. Cameras mounted on nearby businesses, bars, and street corners captured everything the night of the 9th of October 2023. What they recorded has become the single most important piece of evidence in this case, a silent witness, unbiased and unflinching. But silence has its own limitations. A camera can show motion, not motive. It can capture gestures, not intentions. And that's where the debate begins. The footage opens with the white Lexus pulling up along a quiet street lined with murals. Inside the car, 3 people, tension already boiling. The first figure to emerge is the driver. His body language is instantly aggressive, fast, sharp movements. Not the posture of someone looking to calm things down. He rushes toward the passenger side, where Kivhani gets out. She barely has her footing before he lunges. Witnesses later confirm he hits her hard enough to send her crashing to the pavement. Seconds later, another figure steps out, the manager. He doesn't rush to help. He doesn't separate them. Instead, he joins in. The video shows him moving toward her, striking, bending over as if forcing her further down. 2 men, 1 woman, and no escape route. This is the frame the defense clings to. Vani on the ground, both attackers towering above her. Vulnerable, cornered, overwhelmed. A visual embodiment of self-defense. But then, something changes. The driver pulls back. The manager steps away. For a few fleeting seconds, Vani is left alone, struggling to rise. The chaos seems to subside. No more fists, no more kicks, just distance. And here is where the prosecution builds its case. They point to this pause, this retreat. They say the danger was over. The manager wasn't swinging anymore. He wasn't on top of her. He was stepping back, walking toward the car. If she had fired during the assault itself, they argue, it might have been justified. But shooting after? That, in their eyes, is where survival became murder. The footage then shows the moment of no return. Vani draws her firearm. Her arms lift, steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. The muzzle flashes once, twice, then again. The manager jolts, stumbles, and runs. But his body can't carry him far. He collapses onto the asphalt, wounded fatally. Here the footage tells another story too, one that complicates everything. The manager was moving away when at least some of the shots were fired. His back turned, his body trying to escape. Prosecution argues this is evidence of intent. She wasn't firing to stop an attack. She was firing to end him. But trauma doesn't follow courtroom logic. For someone who had just been beaten and threatened with death, could retreat really erase the danger? Could one step backward undo the words, "I'll kill you with one hit"? As the manager crumples, the driver doesn't stay. He scrambles back into the Lexus, slams the accelerator, and speeds off. But not before running into Vani. The footage shows the impact. She's struck by the car as it screeches away. Then silence returns, broken only by the faint echo of gunshots fading into the distance. Police would later describe the scene as surreal. A man dying on the ground, a woman bleeding and bruised, and a white Lexus vanishing into the night, its driver never seen again. The driver is the missing piece in this puzzle. His absence haunts the case. Without his testimony, without accountability for his role, the balance of blame rests entirely on Vani. Investigators confirmed that he was part of the initial attack. They acknowledged he fled after hitting her with the vehicle. But somehow, he has never been charged. His name hasn't been publicly released. His whereabouts, even 2 years later, remain unknown. And this raises its own disturbing question. How can justice be served when one of the key players walks away untouched? For the defense, the missing driver is everything. He proves she wasn't just facing one man, but 2. He proves she was assaulted, knocked down, beaten. He proves her life was endangered from the start. Without him in the courtroom, the jury sees only the final act. A woman pulling a gun and firing at someone who appears to be moving away. For the prosecution, the driver is an inconvenient shadow. His absence allows them to narrow the case to a single, cleaner narrative. Artist versus manager. Survivor versus executioner. But deep down, everyone knows this is incomplete. Because the truth that night wasn't two-sided, it was three. And perhaps the most haunting part of the video is what it doesn't capture. The cameras can't record sound. They can't play back the tone of the argument in the Lexus, the crack in the manager's voice when he made his threat, or the fear in Vani's breathing as she lay on the pavement. The footage offers evidence, but not context. And in trials like this, context is everything. The courtroom became the second stage of Vani's life, though not the one she ever dreamed of performing on. No music, no fans, no bright lights, only walls, judges, and a charge that could erase her future. Her first appearance was stark. Dressed in jail scrubs, her hair pulled back, she faced the judge as the charge was read. Second-degree murder with a weapon. Not premeditated, prosecutors insisted, but deadly all the same. The weight of the words pressed down on the room. Cameras recorded her wide eyes, her still swollen face, the bruises still fresh. The prosecution came in hard. Their case rested on timing. Yes, she had been beaten. Yes, she had been threatened. But at the exact moment she pulled the trigger, the danger had subsided. The man was backing away. The assault was over. They argued that she crossed a legal line, that survival had transformed into retaliation. Florida law, they explained, allows for self-defense only when the threat of death or great bodily harm is immediate, imminent. If the danger has ended, if the attacker is retreating, the right to use deadly force disappears. This was not stand your ground, they said. This was not protecting herself. This was an execution in the street. But the defense painted a different picture, one that reached beyond legal definitions and into human psychology. Imagine, they urged, the terror of that moment, the adrenaline, the fear, the words still echoing in her ears. I'll kill you with one hit. Trauma doesn't end when fists stop flying. Fear doesn't vanish because someone takes a step back. They argued that Vani acted in the only way she believed she could, that her survival instinct took over. That she had no way of knowing whether the next step from her manager would be away or straight back toward her. Her public defender emphasized the imbalance. 2 men against 1 woman. Larger, stronger, coordinated. The driver had already struck her with the car once he fled. How could she possibly believe the danger was gone? Was she supposed to gamble her life on the idea that her attacker was finished, when moments earlier he had promised to end her with a single blow? The judge listened, his tone measured, his face unreadable. He acknowledged the complexity. He admitted there was strong evidence of an attack, a beating, and a credible threat. He even noted that had she fired during the beating itself, self-defense would likely have been clear. But the law required him to weigh the moment she pulled the trigger, not the moments before, not the trauma after. And based on the footage, he found probable cause. The charge stood. At first, bond was denied. She remained in jail, waiting. But outside those walls, public opinion began to split into fierce camps. On social media, hashtags appeared. Number Free Vani and number Justice for the Manager. Online petitions gained traction. Comment sections overflowed with debates about gender, power, and survival. To some, she was a woman criminalized for defending herself against male violence. To others, She was a reckless vigilante who let anger decide her actions. Then, a shift. At a later hearing, bond was granted. $50,000. But the conditions were strict. House arrest. GPS monitoring. No freedom beyond her own front door. On the 20th of November 2023, she posted bond and went home, a home that now became her prison. That same day, she posted on Instagram. The words were defiant, emotional, raw. Supporters flooded her page with messages of love and solidarity. Critics countered with anger, with reminders that a man was dead. The comments mirrored the courtroom, tension divided, heated, unresolved. And then, silence. The news cycle, once buzzing, faded. Headlines disappeared. Reporters stopped showing up to hearings. For reasons never fully explained, updates became scarce. By the end of 2023, coverage had nearly vanished. By 2024, the case seemed forgotten. Yet nothing had been resolved. No trial date announced. No plea deal reported. The system had pressed pause, leaving everyone, Key Vani, the victim's family, the public in limbo. Her supporters asked why. How could such a high-profile case, with surveillance footage, police reports, and public outcry, suddenly stall? Was it backlog in the courts? Was it strategic silence from both sides? Or was it something deeper, something systemic, the uncomfortable truth that cases like this force us to confront? Because this wasn't just a legal fight. It was a cultural one. It forced people to ask, when women fight back, are they punished for surviving? Would the case have been viewed differently if the roles were reversed, if a man, outweighed and beaten by two attackers, had pulled a gun to save his life? Every hearing felt like a microcosm of a larger debate. Where does self-defense end and revenge begin? How do we measure fear? When fear doesn't obey courtroom clocks, how do we reconcile the law's rigid definitions with the messy reality of trauma? As Key Vani sat on house arrest, her music career on pause, the questions grew heavier. Was she a rising artist who lost everything in a moment of survival? Or was she a killer whose ambition curdled into violence? The jury hasn't spoken yet. The trial hasn't come. But the silence itself leaves a haunting question behind. What happens to justice when time drags on? When answers are delayed? And when a woman's entire life is suspended in a courtroom's waiting room? The strangest part of this story isn't the beating. It isn't the gunfire. It isn't even the missing driver who fled into the night and never returned. The strangest part is what happened after, or rather, what didn't. Cases like this usually attract months, sometimes years of rolling coverage. Court updates, lawyer statements, family interviews. Every development dissected in public. But Key Vani's case? After the bond hearing in November 2023, it was as if the narrative evaporated. The headlines stopped. The news cameras turned away. By early 2024, you could search her name and find almost nothing new. For her supporters, this silence feels intentional. A system designed to bury stories that don't fit neatly into legal categories. A culture uncomfortable with women who refuse to be victims. Because what is harder to process than a survivor who fights back so forcefully that she changes the story from tragedy to controversy? For others, the silence is proof of guilt. Why speak on it, they argue, when the facts are already clear? She pulled the trigger after the fight ended. The law is the law. No amount of media debate can change what's on the surveillance footage, but silence doesn't mean stillness. Behind closed doors, the legal machine grinds on, slow and deliberate. Court dockets in Miami are clogged. Self-defense cases often take years. Lawyers negotiate, investigate, stall, and maneuver. And meanwhile, Kivani lives in suspension. Not free, not jailed, not guilty, not convicted. Just waiting. Waiting is its own punishment. For an artist, momentum is life. Every day under house arrest is another day her career stalls. Another day she slips from the spotlight. The world moves fast. Music is even faster. The silence that benefits the court system is the same silence that erases her from culture. And maybe that's the quiet tragedy of this case. Even if she wins, she loses. But the questions linger, louder than any verdict. Why was the driver never charged? Surveillance shows him striking her. Witnesses confirm his role. He hit her with the car. Yet he vanishes from the narrative. No indictment, no manhunt, no trial. The missing man becomes a ghost, his violence washed away by the state's decision not to pursue him. Why does the footage weigh so heavily against her, when it clearly shows her beaten and cornered before she fired? Is the law so rigid that it ignores fear once fists stop flying? Or is it society that resists the image of a woman defending herself with lethal force? And what about the manager's family? They lost a son, a brother, perhaps a father. Their grief is real, and their anger justified. But does justice mean punishing the person who shot? Or does it also mean confronting the violent dynamics that put everyone on that street corner in the first place? The silence leaves space for speculation. Some believe a plea deal is being shaped in the background. Reduced charges, perhaps manslaughter, exchanged for time served. Others think the state may let the case fade until trial pressure cools. And some, more cynically, argue that burying the case spares the public a conversation it doesn't want to have about gender, violence, and survival. Because this case forces uncomfortable reflection. What does self-defense look like when the threat is not a stranger in a dark alley, but someone you know, a manager, a driver, men you once trusted? What does survival look like when you're told the danger is over, but your body is still trembling, your skin still bruised, your mind still replaying a promise of death? And what does justice look like when silence becomes the loudest voice in the room? For Kivani, the waiting continues. Her ankle monitor still blinks, her music still pauses, her future still hangs on a system that moves at its own pace, caring little for lost time or broken momentum. For the public, the case lingers like an unfinished song, a chorus without a final verse, a story stuck in limbo, daring us to fill the silence with our own conclusions. Is she a murderer? Is she a survivor? Or is she something harder to categorize, a woman who lived through both in a single split-second decision? Until a jury sits, until a verdict is read, until the silence breaks, no one can say for sure. But one thing is certain, this story doesn't just belong to her, it belongs to us. It belongs to every conversation about fear, power, and justice. And whether the system speaks or stays quiet, the questions it raises won't go away, because silence may bury headlines, but it doesn't bury truth. Night in Miami carries a certain hum. Neon lights bleed into puddles on the asphalt, music drifts from open car windows, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wails. Life keeps moving, but for Kivani, time has stopped. She sits inside her home, an ankle monitor blinking quietly, a constant reminder that freedom has limits. Her studio equipment gathers dust. Songs remain unfinished. The stage she once dreamed of standing on feels farther away with every passing day. Outside, the world debates whether she's a killer or a survivor. Inside, she lives in the space between both, and maybe that's what makes this story so heavy. It isn't clean. It doesn't fit into the neat boxes the law loves. Prosecutors want to talk about seconds, the gap between attack and gunfire, but trauma doesn't happen in seconds. It happens in waves. It lingers, long after fists stop swinging. Fear doesn't read the statute book. Fear doesn't obey the clock. For women, especially women of color, this isn't a new story. History is filled with cases where survival was rebranded as aggression, where self-defense was reframed as murder. From Marissa Alexander, sentenced for firing a warning shot at her abusive husband, to countless unnamed women who never made headlines. The pattern repeats. The system struggles to see women as victims once they fight back. Kivhani's case is just the latest echo. The silence surrounding it speaks louder than the arguments inside the courtroom. Silence from the media, no longer chasing updates. Silence from the state, as the missing driver walks free. Silence from a culture that doesn't want to reckon with the complexity of a woman refusing to die quietly. But silence doesn't erase. It doesn't erase the footage of her body hitting the pavement. It doesn't erase the words, "I'll kill you with one hit." It doesn't erase the shots fired from fear and survival, nor the man who died because of them. Justice is supposed to bring closure, a verdict, a line under the story. But what happens when justice delays, when months turn into years, when a woman's life is suspended in legal purgatory? Is justice delayed simply justice denied for both her and for the man who lost his life? This story doesn't give easy answers. Maybe it never will, but it forces us to ask better questions. What does it mean to survive in a world that punishes you for it? What does it mean to defend yourself when the law only recognizes fear at the exact second a fist is raised? What does it mean to demand justice when half the story, the missing driver, is left untold? One day, the silence will break. A jury will sit. A verdict will be read. And people will argue again, as they always do. Some will say, the system worked. Others will say it failed. But by then, something irreversible will already have happened. The cost of survival will have reshaped one woman's life forever. Kivhani's name may fade from headlines, but her story won't. It lives in every woman who has ever looked at an attacker and wondered if she'd make it home. It lives in every survivor who's been asked to explain why they fought back, as though staying alive requires justification. And it lives in the silence, heavy, unresolved, haunting. Because sometimes the loudest sound in the justice system isn't the gavel, it's the silence that follows.